The shoe that we're spending the majority of our time in, our foot is going to shape to that. So we want something that's flexible. We've talked about that. We want something that's kind of low to the ground. We're not, walking on a sofa cushion. But the one thing that I learned from your page is that we also want something that is flat from the heel to the toe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when that's how our foot is naturally meant to be at its in its resting position, not standing on a heel. Basically, a lot of our shoes have a heel in them, and so your whole posture is having to change to accommodate that. And we do it almost immediately. Like, we get so used to it that when people put on a shoe that's flat, they feel like they're falling backwards sometimes, which is pretty amazing to see. In terms of basketball, when our ankle is in that position on a bit of a hill, it's not as stable, and so we're far more likely to do an ankle injury if we're just shooting around in our trainers, in like your Nikes or something like that have that higher heel. And so really, to be flat puts our ankle back into its correct position. That's a far more stable position. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be much. It might only be a centimetre, but that means you're not in your most stable position for function. And so it has far-reaching effects all the way up to your thoracic and your neck if you're constantly on a hill, basically, in your shoe. It also changes the way you run because you're more likely to strike very heavily on your heel. I think that's probably one of the most important things about what I'm on about, minimalist footwear. To be flat is to be back to your natural state.
Yeah. So you have some good posts that kind of illustrate the postural adaptations to that heel lift. And so I really like the one where you were you had your heel up on like a little book, and you were showing how it's kind of like, it pitches you forward and your head has to stay over your heels. So now you got to fight to stay back. And so now probably your erectors, your back muscles are on all day, trying to fight that. You're kind of in that more anterior tipped position at the pelvis, and obviously you're going to have issues all the way up the chain as soon as you change what's going on at the foot. So I will try to post that.
Yeah, you can't be functioning as we're designed to be from this neutral position. And neutral's like it's just this thing that you move through. You don't like stay in it. Mm-hmm. But over time, I think there's something what I would call asymptomatic dysfunction. So if you're constantly with all those changes to your structure, then that's not going to help in the long term. And you might not have symptoms initially, but in the long term, I think that's where we see a lot of these knee injuries. People need new knees, knee scopes in their 50s and 60s. There's this quad dominant stance because of a raised heel. And we pretty much put our kids in their little Nikes when they're 4 years old. Mm-hmm. And so they're constantly in this position that is changing their structure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can stand on, weighted plates, or you stand on a book, you'll see what he means with that quad dominant position, because you'll kind of start, your pelvis will tip forward and you'll bend from the knees. And this is huge in basketball. I actually had a scout, a really well-known NBA scout, asked me this question years ago, and I couldn't answer it. He said, why are all these basketball players standing with bent knees? He came up with that observation, and I didn't really notice it at the time, and then I started looking more and more, and everybody is kind of stuck in that bent knee position, and I wonder if that does play a big role.
So basketball shoes are pretty flat, though, aren't they?
More than running shoes. I think there is a drop. I don't know how big of a drop, but I think there is a drop in most shoes.
Yeah, I would say it's probably between 0.5 and 1 centimetre.
Yeah.
Because of that ankle unlocking that happens if you drive it up too much higher. Mm-hmm. And so, but if you go down to the local park and people shooting hoops, hardly anyone's in basketball shoes. They're mostly in their trainers, their runners. And that's not ideal,